How's it going, everyone? Today we're going to be taking apart this Eufy Robovac unit. This is a Model 11. It has a common fault where it's a brush stuck, which is you'll get a solid red light and 4 beeps, as demonstrated here. So one of the first things to check, as you may have seen in a previous video, is the brush, of course. Many times it'll have a piece of trash that it's picked up that gets lodged in that'll be obvious when you remove the brush. You can see here there's nothing in here. In the other video addresses there's a bearing located here that likes to ingest hair and other debris. There's a video that shows you how to take that part apart and clean it. If you clean this bearing out and it's still giving you issues, then it might be time to dig in a little bit deeper to see what's going on. Now, since we have the brush out, so you can see it's still faults, which tells us that either the transmission has debris in it that drives a brush, or there's possibly an electrical problem, which there are fuses on the motor that drive the brush that can be checked, which I'll show you how to do. Or it could also be the main board, which I've already checked with Eufy, and there are no plans to sell replacement boards for these. So it'll be some component level troubleshooting for anyone who's dedicated enough to do that. That'll be a completely different video. Anyways, we will break this down, and hopefully it'll just be a clogged up transmission and we'll have a good Eufy unit here to use. So other than the brush, you want to remove your dust hopper, corner brushes or edge brushes. Make sure your power switch is turned off. Remove the battery cover. And this is actually pretty simple to take apart. It's always a good idea to keep track of your screws. Battery is just a simple clip. Just press this tab, pops right out. For anyone interested, this is a 14.8 volt lithium battery, lithium ion if you want to be technical. Alright, the first thing we're going to need to do is remove these screws from the bumper. There's 6 total. And be sure you use the appropriately sized screwdriver. While I have this on its back, some other faults you may get will be for edge sensor, the wheel stuck, brush stuck, fan stuck, rolling brush stuck, door or drop sensor, bumper stuck. That's another common one with this unit. Drop sensor's dirty, power level too low, obviously. So there's 3 sensors here. There are different drop sensors. They can get pretty dusty those can just be blown off with a can of air, or if you have a cotton swab, you can gently clean those off to take care of that issue. And once you have 6 screws out, this strip just pops right off, pretty easy. Set that aside. Also, there are screws around around the bottom. One here, one here, one here, one here, here. These 2, and there's one here. And you might want to take note, this screw is a different size than the rest of the screws. It's actually a slightly smaller screw, so you'll want to make sure that stays off on its own. This is one of the screws that holds the transmission in, which will need to be out. So I'm going to pull one of these other ones out. You can see here, size difference. It does help to have a magnetic tipped screwdriver, but if you don't, if you just gently turn it back over right side up, the screws should gently fall out of the holes. We're just going to flip this over, keep track of where the screws fall out. Alright, what we got to do now is disconnect this front bumper so it's just barely hooked over the top on these posts here. There's an electrical connector right here. Let's grab the connector, give it a wiggle, and it pops right out. Alright, so if we look at the front of this, there is a switch here, a switch here. These are bumper switches, and sometimes when the things start to get dirty, they will tend to stick in place. If you clean those up really good with some alcohol or a little bit of mild detergent, that usually frees them up. Alright, so now that we have all the screws out and the bumper off, we can separate the halves. Now in some of these, there's this foam bumper that's on there that I'm sure is kind of a spacer for the bumper that we removed. You might have to peel that off. This is the joint where the body separates the halves. So I've already got them peeled back, so it should pop right off. So, not a whole lot to it. Alright, so if you take a look in here, this is the brush motor, transmission, and if you look down in here you can see the drive wheel motors. It's got independent motors for each side. And there's also individual motors for the corner brushes. A lot of motors on this little vac. So what we're going to do, this is the power connector for the motor. Unplug that. There's another screw here. If you remember, there's one that we took out from the bottom. And this screw is also going to be the smaller of the screw sets. And once that's out, motor and transmission come out in one piece. So you can see here there's, looks like some dog hair and fuzz on this motor. There's a good chance that we have a problem inside. Now, as part of the troubleshooting, this will also run if everything's right with the current monitoring circuit, which senses a jam. If everything's working, it'll actually run without the motor installed. So if you're to this point and you reinstall the battery and press the go button and it immediately faults, it's most likely going to be a problem with your circuit board. So with that said, on this transmission there are 4 screws. And these screws here, they're special size for this transmission also, so you'll kind of want to keep those in their own pile. And one got away from me. We'll come back to that one. So this one actually looks pretty clean. Don't really see any debris. You can see here the motor is held in with 2 screws. And just like the other sets of screws, these are a specific size. And now the motor is free of the transmission housing. You can see there is no debris wound around this motor or the shaft. Look here, there's 2 fuses. Actually, while we have this out, we will check the fuses. As you can see, both of those fuses are good. Just real quickly, I'll show you what I mean. It might fault for not having the bumper attached. Immediately goes into fault for stuck brush. So with that said, I'm going to reassemble this motor back together. Most likely it is good. When this goes back together, you can see there's a peg here that helps you put the motor on the correct way. There's a hole here that lines up with this peg. Start the belt. Then line it up. If it's off a little bit, all you gotta do is spin it and it'll walk right onto the gears. Bear with me a moment. I need to locate that last screw. It should turn freely. Just insert this right back in the way we took it out. Now remember, we had the smaller screw that goes in there. Plug it back in. And when we put the lid back on, we need to make sure none of the cables are hanging over any of the points that could get them pinched. This one especially, you need to make sure it's around this post here. Again, we need the smaller screw. Not the smallest, but the smaller one. And all the rest are the long ones. Yes, I missed one. All right, when we're putting the front bumper on, you be very careful not to bend these two springs. Reconnect the connector. Hook it over the top, make sure it moves freely. Hold on to it as you flip it over so it doesn't fall off. Line up the lower bumper piece with the holes. Snug the screws down. They don't need to be super tight. Reinstall the battery. reinstall corner brushes. And just a little hint, if over time your brushes start curling in one direction, just swap sides and they'll be usable again until they bend back in the opposite direction, instead of replacing them all the time. Install the brush. Install the hopper. And you're all done. Of course, we don't have a running Eufy in this case, but hopefully this helps address some of your questions about how to get it apart and how to check your bumper switches and your brush drive transmission. Hope this has helped some of you out, and if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments, and if you like my videos, please like and subscribe.